My boss seriously asked me this. Did they really die, or you just want few days off work? My wife's grandmother died the day before our baby was born. I was taking time off anyway for paternity leave, but a lady from my work called and said since you had a death in the family, you should take the first week as bereavement leave, so you'll still get a paycheck. And I thought, wow, that's nice. So I get back from paternity leave and the same lady from ours says she needs proof that I went to the funeral, and I thought that's rude, but whatever, I had a reader from the funeral, so I brought that in. She said wife's maiden name. Is that your mom's last name? I said no. It was my wife's grandmother, not mine, and she said oh, well in that case, we have to deduct a week from your vacation time. I wasn't even going to ask for bereavement leave, you told me I should take it. To send a professor and the dean my grandmother's obituary when her funeral was scheduled the same day as my final. My favorite part was being told that I should have told my professor about it when the final schedule was posted a month before she died. Grandmother died, and our director called me during the wake to let me know that bereavement was only 3 days and anything more than that would be taken from my time off. Had the woman that made up the entire our department of the company I worked at pull that last name shit when my wife's maternal grandfather died, and I took the provincially mandated paid 3 days off first demanding proof, so I brought in a copy of the death notice. Then she's like, this doesn't match your wife's maiden name. She looked so angry when I reminded her that it was her maternal grandfather, so of course they didn't ever have the same last name. Dad had a massive heart attack while I was on holiday in Greece, flew home, told work, even though I'd used my vacation days without missing a beat. My boss says, you sure you're not just looking for more time off? I quit on the spot. There is no one else other than me and my dad, no mum. I have no brothers or sisters. Remember when my wife's grandfather passed away? I asked my boss about it, and he was really hesitant. It's not immediate family, so I could say no. Next time, just tell me you're taking bereavement. I ended up just taking a half day, just to avoid the drama. A year later, he took 3 days off, because his dog died. Father was in the last week of his life at a hospice. My work said, go, don't think about work, just be with your dad. I was with him in the hospice for almost a full week, and then he passed away. My work then said, you take what time you need and come back when you're ready. Then, someone from my team came by with a beautiful fruit basket and flower arrangement and a signed card from about 20 people in my division. The CEO of our company always said at this company, your health comes first, then your family, and your work is a distant third. Went on to be one of the most profitable companies in its sector and in fact, my country. That man is a good man and I'll always be grateful for the time I had with my dad. The job I have now accumulates hours in my bank every pay period for family time off. This can include parental appointments, funerals, anything as long as it relates to family. When I read some of these comments, I cannot help but be horrified. Every employer should show such compassion to their people when it comes down to parents especially. Edit. I should mention, I started with them in Feb, and my father passed away that September. So I had barely been there 7 months. My dad was in a sales meeting and started mixing up the names of some products. The boss started picking on him, saying, come on, get your things together. You're supposed to come in prepared. My dad replied that he was sorry, but he'd just buried his father that same morning. The boss knew this, but still made the comments. Dad said in the 60s, he had a friend pass away. He asked to be allowed to go to the funeral, which was that day. His immediate supervisor said no. Then shortly after went around to co-workers, should we let Tom go? Do you think we should? In a sarcastic dickish way. Around 2 p.m. the supervisor comes out and says fine, you can go. So my dad grabs his stuff and rushes out of the building. He got to the funeral just as it was ending. My boss showed up to my grandmother's funeral because she didn't see my name listed as one of the survived by in the obituary. I go by my first name at work and the obituary was using my middle name. My grandfather died the night of my senior prom. My mom was the executor of the estate and he lived 2 hours away, so my mom called the high school and asked for me to have the whole week off. We needed time to get his affairs in order, arrange the services, and start dissolving the estate. I was 18, and in the final 3 weeks of my high school career, all testing was done, and I was passing all my classes with A's and B's. Should not have been a big deal. Secretary called every day to let my mom know I wasn't in class and needed an individual excuse for every day. After the funeral, my mom came in the following Monday with a long letter she wrote about burying her father and dealing with his money, debt, house, etc. in the obituary. She slammed it on the desk of secretary and screamed at her for a good 5 minutes to the point of tears. They excused me for the rest of that day and called me in the next for an apology from her. Don't let someone treat you like that, especially at a job. I would quit and cite that moment as the exact reason why you're leaving. Maybe even file with BBB or something. Place I worked, you had to show them the obituary from a newspaper as proof. My mum committed suicide towards the end of last year, and I took 3 days holiday to sort things out and come to terms with it. Came back to work, but in a bad way, couldn't really cope for a while and my boss eventually told me to take 2 weeks off to set myself straight and process everything. Don't worry about those 2 weeks. Received a letter today from ours, and I've got a disciplinary hearing for having more than my allowed time off in a 12-month period, 2 days for the flu and 10 days for the above. Edit, some more info. It's a letter received from ours signed by themselves and my boss. It states it's a disciplinary hearing, and I'm entitled to bring a representative if I wish. Outcomes could include a written warning or dismissal from the company. It also has the dates off, along with the reasons, flu, and bereavement leave. So a while back at my old job, I had this GF and my father passed away. She was a bitter girl and very selfish, so when I told her this, she said, "Are you lying to me? So I feel bad for you?" I swear to you, I just looked at her with a blank stare and walked away. Who would lie about that? At my old job, asked for 2 weeks off because his mother had died. Some coworkers decided to send flowers, so they called to get the address of the funeral home. His mother answered the phone. She was quite surprised to learn that she was apparently dead. Mom died, and I had 3 days of grievance and a week of vacation. So when she died, I asked for my 3 days of grievance immediately. I was in no shape to work in retail. Then I was going to fly out to the funeral, lived in a different state, and use my vacation. Some dumb supervisor with no actual authority made me come into work because she felt like I should use grievance for the funeral. I cried the whole time I was there, and I didn't even care. Finally, another supervisor asked what happened. I told her, and she sent me home. I received a call from corporate apologizing profusely for the idiot supervisor who took it on herself to force me to come to work. Cousin committed suicide and I asked for bereavement leave, 3 days paid leave, and mentioned that we are having the service, then I'll be going over to move her belongings the same day. My supervisor wanted proof of the death, proof of the service, and proof that I was moving her belongings. When I came back to work, I just dropped the police report on her desk and walked away. Long time ago, a childhood friend of mine passed away. I told my supervisor that I was going to miss a shift to go to his funeral, and she responds with, "Last week you missed a shift because you were sick. This week your friend is dead. What's gonna happen next week?" I said, "Well, alright then." Dropped my name badge on the floor and walked out. This actually happened to me recently. Manager here and I had just interviewed this girl for a part-time job that I really liked. The week she was supposed to start, she called me crying in tears telling me a close relative had died. For privacy purposes I won't say which relative, and she needed to go out of town for a week for the funeral. I really needed her to start ASAP, but I understood. She came back a week later just like she said and requested I make her full-time. Why? Her other job fired her for not giving 2 weeks notice about the funeral. She's been working full-time ever since and is one of our most valued employees. My mom died. I found out through a message from my grandpa that I read at a red light. It hit me so hard I had to pull off in the neighborhood, and I called my boss and had my coworker drive the truck back to the shop. Went home and called my boss that night and said that I needed a few days off to mourn and be with my family. He said, "Okay, but do you really think sitting at home crying about it is going to help you feel better?" I just hung up on him. Text my coworker, told him I would be out, and I told him what my boss had said. He and my boss grew up together, and he ended up calling him and shouting at him over it. I got an apology later, but I still couldn't believe someone could think that way. Our mother passed away. My sister came to me sobbing, saying that her boss gonna try to take pay away because she didn't have a copy of the death certificate to bring to them. It had been the day after the funeral, and she was still grieving severely. After we finally showed them the death certificate, they still tried to argue that we didn't bring it in time. Comment and subscribe.